What's going on, guys? You got Local Ham Sandwich here with my second place Locals Horus Centur-Ion deck profile. This was a pre-Crossover Breakers Horus list, but I plan to, near at the end of the video, discuss some text and some theory for post-Crossover Breakers with this list, so do stay in tuned for that towards the end of the video. But before we jump into it, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Anything you like about this deck, any thoughts you have on the deck theory going forward would be much appreciated. So I'm just going to hop right into the main deck here. Honestly, both main deck engines are pretty standard for what their core engines want to be. So for Centur-Ion, 3 Chimera, 3 Trudea, 1 Autry, 1 Gargoyle, 3 Stand Up, and the Terraforming, 3 Emblema Oath, Wake Up, and Phalanx. Again, all pretty standard for Centur-Ion. This is kind of like the solved, I guess, ratios for this list here. And basically, I guess aside from the terraforming, some folks don't run terraforming, but it's just one extra consistency piece, so I run it. I guess you don't necessarily have to. It's a 41 card list, so if you wanted to bump it down to 40, you could just cut that terraforming. But yeah, if you've been to the channel long enough, you know all about Centur-Ion. Not much to go on there. Pretty standard in terms of that. And then for the Horus, also pretty standard for the sort of smallest slim Horus engine, which is just 3 Imseti, 1 Happy, 2 King Sark. Again, also not a whole lot to say here with the Horus engine in terms of ratios. You could run Duamatef for some easy OTKs, but my thought is, since Centur-Ion has already 4 cards you never want to see in your hand, you could see more bricks if you put in Duamatef that way, because Happy itself is already a brick. But the theory again with Horus is just you have so many discard outlets, Imseti, King Sark, Stand Up, and then any way to get to Stand Up, so any sort of bricks in your hand are fine, but you still want to limit the amount of those in the deck. So I'm running the sort of minimum Horus package here. And then beyond that, the rest is non-engine. Centur-Ion always good at fitting in some non-engines. So we got 3 Ash, 3 Nibiru. I opted for 2 Bestials. Again, this was pre-Crossover Breakers, so any Fiendsmith folks at Locals, I thought that was a good pick. And then I've also got 3 Talents, 1 Called By, 3 Droplet, and 3 Infinite Impermanence. Again, for pre-Crossover Breakers, I think I kind of built this to prepare for post-Crossover Breakers and just adjusted some small things. But with what knowledge I had prior to YCS Anaheim, I thought this was the best. Now, watching a bunch of that YCS Anaheim stuff, it's kind of, there is some things I do want to change here. But for the last hurrah of pre-Crossover Breakers, I thought these were all pretty good. And they're all going to be decently good going to the next format, I think. Just going to be some other options that may be a little bit better. We will discuss that here shortly. And then moving on to the extra deck. Also pretty standard for the Centur-Ion package here in the extra. I've got 2 Primus, 1 Auxilla, 2 Legatia, 1 Crimson Dragon, and the 2 Cosmic Blazar. Pretty standard. The only thing that you could potentially change is if you want to cut the second Primera Primus. Doesn't always come up, but I like it in terms of sometimes it can be an interruption if you choose to Synchro Summon it on your opponent's turn rather than the Cosmic Blazar, if they potentially get rid of your level 8 rather than your level 4. So that's just fine to have in the last synchros. The Chaos Angel for the Bestials, and that Antimaster Packbit, your honorary 3rd level 8 Centur-Ion monster. Really good next format into the Centur-Ion matchup as a Ultimate Slayer target. You just have to hit the synchros with it rather than the main deck monsters. But yeah, and then of course this is a Horus list, so we have access to some rank 8s. You may have seen these in either or any of the 3 videos that came up prior to this. The Photon Lord, the Runix Eternity, Typhon, don't really make it that much, but it's still nice to have. And then the IPSP. Horus stuff I feel like excels a bit even better than the Bestials in terms of putting bodies on board for an IP or for a rank 8. So I think having all those options is pretty good as well. And this is pretty standard for Horus build. Not really going to see much change into the next format. We'll discuss that again pretty shortly once I go over the side deck. And then for the side deck, I decided to go for 3 Fualos instead of 3 Perulia for the end of Rhoda format. I felt like a lot of folks at Locals are going to be playing some extra deck heavy decks, so I felt fine every time I saw it, which was only I think once or twice. It was really good, so no complaints there. Although I think next format I would probably put it in the main deck. Again, I'll go over that here pretty soon. I had 2 Droll on the side. Droll I'm a little bit iffier on going into next format. I had potentially had this in here for next format, but Malice can play around Droll because they set most of their things, and if you Droll Ryzeal, they kind of just make Detonator pass, and that's sometimes enough. So maybe Droll comes out. I had Ghost Ogre in here. This never came in during Locals. Better in theory, I think, going into Crossover Breakers format, probably a main deck card. But for last format, it was still pretty good. Then I have a Thrust package. So I had 3 Thrust, 2 Lightning Storm, Duster, Barrier, DDG. I think next format, given the death of Tenpai and the death of Snake Eye, DDG I think becomes way less powerful, and Barrier is alright against Ryzeal. It's really good against Ryzeal as long as they don't cross out it. But you could probably think of some better options for Ryzeal going first that will hit more decks in the format, considering this would be a Tenpai hit or even a mirror match hit for Centur-Ion. But with Tenpai being dead, and then the Fiendsmith variants doing all kinds of different link summons, I feel like Barrier probably a little bit weaker. But that was it for the second place list. Obviously the 3 matchups you saw prior to this video, I did get the bye round 1, so that did help me a little bit. That video goes up after this one on Thursday. But that Orcust as a Menad list that my friend Will was running, really tricky, but I managed to pull it out. My friend Zach was on FAAK. I didn't draw any hand traps that were meaningful against that deck. He went Marble Combo and 2-0'd me. It is what it is. I think FAAK can still be a thing next format, as any Fiendsmith or Kashtira list can. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's kind of an interesting balance of the non-engine next format, considering Malice and Ryzeal can play around more hand traps than before, and we don't need so many hand traps for Snake Eye because it's dead. But and then yeah, round 4 was against Adventure Synchron, against a new guy at our Locals, Ryan. Really cool guy. Synchron is just a complicated deck, and he may have messed up his combos a couple times. So it is what it is. And then Fualos came up really well into game 2. So that was pretty nice. That's another reason why I think Fualos into the main deck is probably going to be a little better. So I'm going to discuss some of the changes for Crossover Breakers format here. The first thing I want to discuss here, I've got the 3 Fenrir. Now this could be the Kashtira package in general, so you could do 2 Unicorn, 1 Fenrir, 1 Birth, 1 Great Soth, or any ratio of those, depending on what you can fit. We could even argue cutting the Horus stuff just for a larger cash package. Just because Kashtira next format is going to be so good. Just a Fenrir sticking on the board alone can punish Detonator and Heart's Cryptor, as long as if they don't deal with Fenrir first. So I think Kashtira next format is going to be really good. Shout out to MetaGamesGX and Phillip DeAngelo, that top 8 Horus Centur-Ion list that they posted recently. I think the theory for Fenrir is really nice. I think probably going to be a mainstay in this deck, especially against Ryzeal, because in this deck, Centur-Ion struggle against Ryzeal, so you want to sort of do Kashtira Horus control through Detonator until you can set up your Centur-Ion plays. So I think that's really nice. I've got only 1 copy of Slayer here. You can run it at 3. I just had it for the thrust package, plus the Mirror Logic aggregator. I think Slayer is a little better if you can run multiple pieces for it. Obviously in this deck you can run Pack Bit and Aggregator, so you have a Synchro and Xyz target, but against like a Link deck, like against Terahertz or something like that, with Malice, your Link target is IP, which doesn't feel great. So I may not run Ultimate Slayer at first, although I can definitely see how strong it is against Ryzeal specifically. So that's a thing to consider. Similarly with Artifact Lancia, if you have space for it, it's cool. I think personally I wouldn't run it at more than 2 copies, just because Malice is the only banished deck really, aside from like Rogue Shifter decks, and I guess the Kashtira stuff. And I don't think Evenly's going to be super popular. So Lancia I may not run in favor of other things that hit Malice a little better, like you saw I had Droplet in the main, Triple Tactics, stuff like that, some board breakers. It's tough against Malice if they have Desave Worm set up, because you have to bait that Desave Worm and then you can break through boards. Lightning Storm is also a really good one against them if you've baited out the Desave Worm. I've got Book of Eclipse here. I think is really good in the Ryzeal. Really good if you're going first against Malice too. You can book their first 2 face down, or their first 2 monsters, and they can't link summon with them. I think Book of Eclipse even has main deck capability in Centur-Ion, given the interaction with Trudea and Negation, stuff like that. But it probably is a little better than Droplet in some cases, so I'll have to toy with that. Then the last thing I have here just to discuss is deck lockdown. Again, Phillip DeAngelo was running that in his list, and I think it's still good in theory. I think Malice can play around it a little bit, just because again they mostly set stuff. But Ryzeal, if they have specifically X'd Ryzeal in the opener, then they can just shut this down. If they have Bonfire, obviously they can't search X'd with this, and X'd will not get its search on summon, but Aggregator will negate it, and then if they have any follow-up from the X'd, they can keep going. So potentially deck lockdown not as great into Ryzeal, but I think I will still mess with it because it's just really good in Centur-Ion, given Auxilia's protection. So overall, I'm really excited for this format, given the ban list. Tentai's dead, Snake Eyes is pretty much dead. Yubel will still be a thing, but I think the biggest thing is just going to be how to counter Ryzeal, Malice, and any Fiendsmith variant. So it's probably going to be a combination of moving some of these hand traps that they already have in the main to the side. Like I think Bestial is going to be moved to the side for the Fiendsmith matchups. And potentially a thrust package still in the side, but it may not be in your best interest to have thrust for detonator in some instances, because you have to bait out the 1 destruction. So if your bait is only Centur-Ion cards, that can be a little tricky depending on what your hand looks like. But again, there's arguments for all this kind of stuff, and I think definitely a lot to play around with. I'm probably going to run a list very similar to Phillip DeAngelo from that Rochester regional for next week. I'll put that video in the description. Shout out both those guys, MetaGamesGX and Phillip DeAngelo. Great video from those guys. Definitely go check it out for some more theory into this format. But I'm going to stop yapping. This is all I have for this Horus Centur-Ion deck profile and discussion on the next format. Again, definitely make sure you comment below any thoughts you have on the deck going forward, any theory. I would love to discuss it with you guys. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.